Curt Kalk. We're at Mille Lacs for the State of the Band message. We just heard Marge talk. One of the questions some of our listeners would like to know is, what's the state of Mille Lacs Lake? How healthy is it?
Mille Lacs Lake over the past few years have been really closely managed, co-managed with the state of Minnesota and the Mille Lacs Band and the tribes of the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. The co-management process has worked very well. There's two entities together to look at how the population is on the lake. And of course, if you always put two heads together are better than one, and this has kind of showed us to give a more intensive look at how many fish are harvested from Mille Lacs. By doing this, we've kept a closer count. Population seems steady. This year, the tribal's declaration for their share will be 122,500 pounds, and that will be shared with the other Great Lakes tribes.
When we were talking earlier, you mentioned that the high-tech sports fishing, the use of GPS, the use of sonars, is a possibility for being limited. What would you like to see happen with that?
I think in the future, if we've seen that technology went too far to begin to cause intense harvests, whether they would be tribal or non-tribal, electronics would be a way to limit the amount of accessibility to spots where fish are. By limiting accessibility would mean that it would be easier to go back maybe sometimes and not use electronics. This may help the population of fish. You may spend more time with your children, even if you're not finding a spot to fish on. At least you're out there doing something and enjoying not just the fishing, but the lake and its surroundings.
Mille Lacs is a big sprawling body of water, very productive. We netted on it a couple of years ago. Very wonderful harvest. What does this lake mean to band members?
I think it means a lot to band members. It means everything to them. It's part of our life. It always has been. Our grandfathers, our great-grandfathers looked and said, this is a resource. Mille Lacs isn't here by accident. Our members are here for a reason. There was great wild rice lakes in abundance. There's fish in abundance. And we want to keep that tradition going. And by doing that, we'll manage the resource that we can continue. It's important to Mille Lacs because it's about food, subsistence. This talks about diabetes is relevant with the Indian tribes, and some of the natural food sources are alternatives to the more high in salt and sugar foods that we have today. So by keeping this available to band members, they also have accessibility to more nutritional and natural foods.
How are you looking out for the seventh generation?
What we were looking at is sustainable resources, sustainable harvests. Try not to manipulate the system with artificial techniques. We've seen what dams, the destructors they've caused in lakes. We look at fish stocking. It's done in certain areas, but it's clearly shown biological fact that a native fish will produce more eggs than a stocked fish, ones that's produced or crossbred in captivity and then released into the wild. And by maintaining the native stock in a lake, that maintains it for future generations to come. And if it can stay that way and pure and clean, then it's one way we're looking out for it.
We heard that there's more acceptance for tribal fishing on Mille Lacs than there was 15 years ago.
I think there's a lot more acceptance as far as knowledge. Even being on the electronic computers, websites have seen that you can't ignore the biology. Tribal harvests are very selective. It's very accountable for. We count, weigh, and measure every fish we catch. The general public gets a creel survey that's just a random survey when taken when they come into the landing. We make sure that we're very accurate about what fish we take and how many we take. People have started to understand that a little more, that it's not about technique anymore. It's about the biological harm. If you're not causing biological harm, then the technique isn't the most important thing.
This is Nick Vanderpine and Curt Kalk for News from Indian Country. Miigwech.